Welcome to the Encouragement Engineering Podcast, where we help people to combat the negativity that inundates their daily lives with a positive perspective and positive action. Today's guest is Dominic Teich. Dominic Slice Teich brings his fighter pilot background and applies these skills to guide goal-oriented individuals with techniques that American fighter pilots use to ensure mission success. High output individuals struggle with information overload, so he created the largest online group of fighter pilots to guide action takers in short, impactful steps. Since 2002, Slice has guided hundreds of students toward their goals. His blueprint is called Single Seat Mindset, an impactful group of 40 plus fighter pilots guiding with combined experiences of 700 plus years. That's crazy. They share proven formulas and life advice to their inside circle community to ensure success and big achievements, all while avoiding overwhelm, overload, and flameout. They dive deep into the productivity world to provide guidance through short, impactful steps. So please welcome to the show, Dominic Teich. Don, thanks for being here today. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Bob. Looking to unpack some things and help.
Sounds great. Well, if we can, let's first tell people about you and how you got to where you are, because I always find that interesting, the background story of who people are.
Yeah, so I got the itch to be a pilot at a pretty young age, and that's kind of the path that I followed. Growing up, I think having known that I wanted to either be a Major League Baseball player or a fighter pilot really helped, because just, growing up, kids are exposed to a lot of drugs and other various activities. And I played baseball all the way up through junior college, but then avoiding the drug scene and, kind of keeping my nose clean, as they say, really helped when it came to, put my application in and start that process to join the Air Force. So I was a little bit different than most, though. I joined through officer training school.
Okay.
I started civilian flying when I was 16, and by 18, I was a civilian flight instructor. So I started building time that way.
Oh, wow.
And then I had enough time to basically start pursuing an airline career or put an application in and try to join the military. And both of them kind of happened at the same time. And I decided to go the military route just because I figured it was kind of a one and done type of offer.
Right.
And then, joined the military, went through officer training school, and competed for a fighter jet spot. And with enough grit and determination, I weaseled my way into a fighter jet, and the rest is history. Now I'm teaching student pilots, fighter jet student pilots here at the schoolhouse. So everything from, a student that's gone through the screening program, undergraduate pilot training, the fighter track, introduction to fighter fundamentals in another jet. And then when they finally get to us, it's the first time they've been inside and actually flown a real life fighter jet. So it's pretty cool. And we also do requalifications for guys coming back to the jet. So, but the young students, that are here learning to fly for the first time, they're just so happy and excited to be here. It's a lot of fun.
And that's a lot of work. I mean, being, even on the civils or on the civilian side, there's a lot to it. I mean, people, it's not just pull a stick and press a gas or that type of thing. You got to know aeronautics, you got to know your engineering, you got to know your instrumentation, and then you multiply that by 800 times for a fighter jet. It's crazy.
Yeah.
Well, if we can, I'm curious. I got to know, where did the name Slice come from? I mean, I'm thinking slice of pizza.
Yeah, so I do like to play golf a lot. I didn't get it because I have a slice.
Are you left-handed?
So I'm right-handed.
Okay.
Yeah, so depending on the course, that a slice will either play to your handicap, or it'll kill you. But so I didn't get it because I golf, but because as a young fighter pilot, I busted a ride because I almost essentially sliced my instructor pilot in half with my jet. So we were doing, for the lay person, essentially dogfighting like you see in Top Gun, right? So very close in maneuvering, where your objective is to shoot the other aircraft before they can shoot you. And I broke a training rule to shoot my instructor pilot. and it resulted in us having a very close pass. And um, yeah, and so I was also in Japan at the time in an American fighter squadron over there, and the squadron mascot was a samurai warrior. So the
Wow.
slice,
Yeah.
ninja sword, all that kind of stuff fit back then. And up to that point, I'm very grateful. Up to that point, I had been called a lot of other things that were much more derogatory in nature. So we'll say that I was the intersection of luck and timing and hard work.
Yeah. We'll go with that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, great. It's always interesting how those names come about and so forth. And I'm glad you didn't end up with a derogatory one because that'd be a little odd.
Yeah.
Well, it's interesting because I was looking up your information and so forth, and it talks about all your program and all that you guys offer. I'm curious because a fighter pilot, it's like you need to make these quick decisions. So is that what you help people with? Because it seems, you talk about how you got to make decisions on your own. Are those usually quick decisions? Do you help people train their minds so they can make these? How does that work?
Yeah. So what ended up happening is it's been over 6 years ago now, but we moved to Phoenix, Arizona, and I interviewed and got hired by a reserve squadron. So I don't have to move. And
Okay.
what that ushered in was for many years I'd been studying. I grew up in real estate. I'd owned some real estate, and I started buying real estate in Phoenix. And then I started basically a passive multifamily apartment investing company.
Hmm.
And I had written a book there. We called it Single Seat Investor. And I'm not telling your listeners to go get that book, but essentially why that's important is that business. And the reason I'm saying not to get that book is it's very specific to what I do, and it's very specific to fighter pilots.
Right.
But I leveraged what I learned there in that business. And during COVID, I was out on a mountain bike ride one day, and this class was really struggling, and it was a hobby to start out. But I was like, we have as fighter pilots, a unique single seat mindset, right? So that's the name of the company, is Single Seat Mindset. And I took a lot of the lessons learned in the first couple of businesses that I owned and just leveraged them into a hobby at the time. It was the worst hobby I
Yeah.
ever started. But it gave us a lot of purpose because those lessons that we learn, at 800 plus miles an hour, those processes and those kind of things, anybody can learn, right?
Right.
Because Bob, I haven't flown with a student that has gotten in the aircraft and just been good right out the
Right.
door. It
Right.
doesn't work. I mean, flying a fighter jet is incredibly difficult. It's a very physically demanding occupation, and you have to have at least some smarts and the
Yeah.
ability to learn because things move very fast.
Yeah.
And as humans, we can only do one thing at a time. So you have to know what thing to do next. We call them, near rocks and far rocks. Like, what are the things that are going to kill you right now?
Yeah.
And then also you need to be thinking about the stuff that's out in front of your jet, so that if you're misprioritizing those tasks, you don't die. Right. So there are things that
That's
you
a
need to be doing.
it's a good thing to think about, not dying.
Yeah. It's like the nearest alligator, right? If you're
Right.
looking at the alligator 50 feet away, but you have one foot away from you, that's the dude that's going to eat you.
Yeah.
So anyways, I basically saw a need during COVID when the class was really struggling. And what it started out as was these short little, and it took on a bunch of different names. We call it the Competent Wingman. It's just a program that I started sending to the class of fighter jet students once a week. And it was just a short 2-minute message because they're very busy. It's a very
Yeah.
difficult syllabus and training program. And I was like, they need something every week at least that they're not getting because they're locked down or masked up or,
Right.
not doing the social thing in the fighter squadron. And then that grew into a program that we automated online, and people started using it that were not fighter pilots. And they're like, actually, this applies to business and other things. And then I asked the older fighter pilots, the instructors, I was like, well, when you retire, what are you going to do? You're
Yeah.
just going to let your story die. And so because I had written books before, started businesses, built websites, done stuff that other fighter pilots weren't really doing,
Yeah.
at least not on a big scale. Like, that's just generally, fighter pilots don't do that. I was like, well, what if we start the Single Seat Wisdom series of books? And so each one of those books is about a 10-minute story 20 times over. So there's 20 chapters, each written by a different fighter pilot.
Oh,
And it just goes through like a life problem or something that you could have, whether that's perspective, learning how to debrief, missionizing your business. I mean, you name it, with that fighter pilot's wisdom, just packaged in something that you can read in 10 minutes.
Right.
And that has been one of the most powerful things that, we've been able to do, is put these books together so people can read and just kind of read into the mindset, kind of how do fighter pilots think, and
Yeah.
can I learn that myself? And the answer is yes.
Yeah. Well, and you brought up a couple interesting points there too that I want to touch on because, yeah, when you're in a fighter jet, you're going out, you said over 800 miles an hour. Things change rapidly and you got
Yeah.
to be able to adjust to that. I appreciate that thing. Okay, what's going to kill you now? And then looking down the road when you're going at that speed, that thing that you think is so far away will be right on top of you very shortly. And so many times in life, we got to think of those things too. It's you never know. None of us are here permanently. I always, if you will, preach on this, but final documentation. It doesn't mean you're going to die tomorrow, but make sure you have it in place because something could happen that all of a sudden that is now in your forefront. And you don't want to have to be signing those documents in a hospital bed.
Yeah.
Get stuff like that out of the way. And even in your business, you may, like found out, okay, you started this and then it's very impactful. Now it's coming quickly. Now you got all these customers coming. Oh no, what do I do? How do we grow
Yeah.
that? How have you been able to, if you will, shift that mindset of, yeah, it's kind of like you said, it started as a hobby, but then something clicks. You help them to see that motion of, okay, we got to turn this, we got to turn this engine on and get going here.
Yeah. So with that business, so the first business was the real estate one, and it didn't start. Granted, businesses, you have to generate money if you're running a business, right? Otherwise, you have a very expensive hobby,
Yeah.
right? We all know that. But then the second business I started, I was buying and selling stuff so the real estate business was going, and then I was buying and I have uncles and family members that do this, where they buy stuff at auctions and then they
Yeah.
either fix them or resell them. But that business it was very high transactions.
Right.
Unless you get into the bigger ticket items where you're selling like, tractors and bigger, $80,000 items. But it was about money, and that's not a lasting thing to start on, is money. And it burned me out. So I shut the business off. And then, like I said, as we moved into COVID, I was like, there's gotta be a way for us to overcome these challenges, and that birthed single seat mindset. And then as it grew, I decided early on that I wasn't going to keep the money from that business. We were going to give it all away to a children's cancer nonprofit, which increased the level of purpose behind it. Right? There's a much higher purpose to it, because yes, it is about money. And the reason I decided the big switch is, I go, if I can figure out how to monetize this business, then it will drive my purpose higher, because we'll be helping even an entire other group of people, which are families that have children going through cancer treatments.
Right.
So how can we, up the ante, if you will, and help people with that business? And if I can, and because I've owned businesses, I can set it up like one. It was not easy, but like, I know how to set that up. I can set the framework. We can build on top of that. And then now, as it's generating money, even though we're giving it away, we're monetizing it, and it's increasing the impact more than just, we're sharing stories to the current and future generations with, fighter pilot wisdom. I'm helping current fighter pilots. I hope if it's not a help, then I hope that they just unsubscribe. And then, we're also helping these families that, hospital bills are, I can only imagine.
Yeah.
Just a punch to the face, especially if you're not, if you don't have a lot of money.
Yeah, well, anybody to have your kid go through that. I mean, that's just, bless you for doing that, because that's a big calling. I certainly, it touches my heart that you do that. When I read that, I was like, wow, that's really cool. And you bring up a great point, because that drives your purpose higher, so that you know what you're giving for. It's bigger than you. Nobody likes to see that. You talk about some of the tips for peak performance. Can you share some of those with us, like 5 tips of peak performance or something that would help people?
We'll do, I think I've kind of distilled them down into some things that I think about, and I'll call them the big 3.
Okay.
So the first one is, if you are an action oriented person, right? So you can read all the self-help books that you want. You can go to college and have big fancy degrees, but if you don't start putting stuff into action, you don't learn, right? You don't train your mind. Like if you think about a fighter pilot, they go through academic training and instruction, but it's not until they get in the jet and start putting those things into action is where they start learning, right? So those, and I'm not talking about the learning modality, whether you're visual or audio or those types of things. I'm talking about you actually doing it. So you move the information from prefrontal cortex into, I have to think about it a lot, to motor cortex. I mean, think of a professional, that we just had the World Series, right? Think of the professional baseball player that's in the batter's box. He's not thinking about how to hit the ball. There
Right.
maybe are some thoughts. He is motor cortex. He's trained his brain that this happens, this is my reaction, and he's done it so many times. He's learned that. So that learned behavior, right? Nobody grows up and is just a Major League Baseball player. That's an incredibly difficult thing to do, right?
Right.
So action is how we learn, but what action can generate, what happened to me is what I call the achievement hamster wheel, where now as I start to do things and I put things into action, I get more ideas, right? And it's like, ooh, that's a good idea. Now you find yourself just at a full sprint on this hamster wheel that you can't get off, and you're stuck because you haven't defined success. If you have defined success, it was only for you. So it's very me-oriented success.
Right.
And then it burns you out, right? So the way that and that happened to me about 6 years ago, where I had on the exterior a great life. I own a couple of businesses. I was a professional fighter pilot. Pretty much anything that I had put my mind to in my life. Granted, I had a bunch of failures, but those events didn't define me, and I was successful. But in my mind, I crashed, and I went through a very painful couple of years going through counseling and stuff like that, just from life. It all built up. But part of that was I was in this achievement hamster wheel where I was a high achiever. I was getting things done. I was an instructor pilot. I was starting a business. I was doing all this stuff, but I hadn't, and I'll touch on this here in a second, but success. But then, after you define success, asking yourself, what significance does that have beyond me? So outward of me, does that mean that my story ends? So if I achieve success, if I make a $20 million business and I sell it, cool, the business is successful, but then am I going to end up finding myself living under the streets in Las Vegas doing fentanyl with a bunch of homeless people because I blew all my money? Right. So I guess the story and how it translated into more of a timeless story was really helped by single seat mindset, because we write these books, they're kind of timeless. My kids can't unpublish these books.
Yeah.
They could take my real estate business, fight over it, sell it all off, and then gamble the money away. But the significance of single seat mindset, that company, was more timeless, because now I'm helping fighter pilots even share their stories. Ones that would never have thought of publishing a book, they're now able to do that. And we're 40 fighter pilots strong now. We're onboarding about 20 a year, getting them to write their story and publishing them. So it's a pretty young company. The achievement hamster wheel, though, because I get stuck in this even now, but I recognize it. And the thing, this is an oversimplification, but for me, I started going to bed earlier, which then prevented me from having a beer and eating a bag of chips and watching a Netflix show, right?
Right.
And then I woke up refreshed, and the way that I got out of the hamster wheel was 5 minutes each morning. I just sit still. You can meditate, pray, sit in silence, read the Bible, do your thing there, but you need to spend 5 minutes not doing, especially if you're an action-oriented person. Just sit still. And the silence is deafening. I tried 15 minutes when I started. I couldn't do it, Bob.
Yeah.
Could not do it.
No, I can imagine, because I saw a clip on one of these home improvement shows, and it's the guys that are up in Detroit fixing up the homes, and one guy meditates and the other guy's sitting down to do it. He's opening his eyes, and he's the one that his mind's going 15 different directions all the time. And I understand that. Yeah, just you got to take that time, though. And I do the same thing in the morning. That's my time. I'm able to do that. I have a cup of coffee. I can chill, let my mind just slowly get things going, say some prayers. You need that, like you said, that quiet time, and it can be deafening for those of you that are constantly want to go achieve and get things done, but sometimes you just need to shut it off.
Yep. Well, the way that I shut it off, because somebody that's listening to that is going to go, well, I don't know how to. And it's like, well, the how for me was I put a pen and paper next to me. So anytime my brain tried to interact with what I was doing, I would just write it down and basically move that onto the pad of paper next to me, go back to the stillness, right? and force yourself to do that. Cause it is, for me, I tried 15 minutes. Like I lasted about 37 seconds. I couldn't do it. But you need to chill. And then what that helps you do is it helps you see the intentionality of your day. What,
Right.
as if I can debrief myself at the end of the day, this is what made today good. What is that thing? And then, and this isn't a new concept. This is an original thought, the biggest domino. What's your biggest domino today you can knock over that knocks over other ones? So that's the achievement hamster wheel. 5 minutes each morning. It's super important. Go to bed earlier. If you're not a morning person, you can learn to become one.
Yes.
Wake up 5 minutes earlier.
Yeah.
Very few people are morning people. I was not one. I was the one that woke up and I had a 7-minute routine to get out the door to basically blast into work.
Yeah.
And as I got into work, somebody asked me this: if you don't have your agenda for the day when you walk into work, somebody else will give you theirs.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
Yeah. And so that morning time then became a very sacred time to go, what's wrong in my business? It allowed me to debrief and kind of tweak the machine, tweak the plan, so that as I'm executing, because fighter pilots plan, execute, debrief. So it allowed me to kind of tweak my plan. And then in the day, as I'm executing, I can do the tweaks to my plan because I have that intentionality. And then I can be debriefing myself throughout the day or at the end of the day. So it kind of, we learn through action. So throughout the day, I was able to kind of tweak that machine. And I mean, even if for me, I was waking up an hour early every morning and working on my business, and then I was going into work. So I was waking up at 3:45 or 4. I'd work for an hour, and then I'd, go into work, or some days if I had to report later, I would get a few hours of work done, and it all adds up.
Yeah.
But that intentionality, the achievement hamster wheel, you'll know when you're on it because you'll start to be, I call it flameout, right? Because we fly single seat, single seat and single engine fighter jet. And if you run out of gas, you flame out, and we glide about as good as the space shuttle coming back in on reentry. So
there's a thing you can't avoid. It's called gravity.
Yeah. So avoid the achievement hamster wheel, have some intentionality and start that at the beginning of your day. The next one is, people think of single seat mindset. So fighter pilots were arrogant, were, all of these words, right? And I would say that unfortunately, sometimes that's true. Mm-hmm. But there is a certain, there's just a confidence that is contagious, right? That becomes part of that profession because it's a pretty dangerous profession.
Yeah.
And it can be, unfortunately, it can go one way or the other. But I think
there's not much in between. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think if you can bring that humble confidence, that is competent confidence versus the arrogance, I think that's where things can really start to move. But even as a single seat fighter pilot, rarely do I fly by myself. I'm typically employing the jet with other fighter pilots in other jets, right? And it could be as little as 2 jets. We very regularly employ in four ship formations. And then I've been a mission commander of over 100 different, assets, all working towards, mission success. And what I'm getting at is team. So if you're a solopreneur, that does not mean that you need to do everything yourself. Now, we both know as you're starting a business out, if you're the founder, you're going to have to do everything initially. You're going to have to interview people or whatever. But at some point, if you are a kind of a control freak, or if you want things done so specifically, that's going to break you and you're not going to grow. So there's that team that you control will also help you show what your weaknesses are, and you don't have to force it. You don't need a team as you start. You need to start. That action needs to go. You need to, for me, when I started my real estate company, I fired 85% of the people I hired in the first year. We bought our first apartment complex, and I very rapidly, my CPA had no idea what she was doing. She didn't know about accelerated cost depreciation. I fired the contractor. I hired a foreman. I hired a whole new contracting company. Like, there was just a lot of that first year, there's just a lot of turbulence. And guess what? The thing that helped me overcome that as I was building the team was each day I would be like, what am I fearing, or what gives me pain? And then I would grab onto that and go, I need to fix that because I don't want to live with this. And so
Right.
that kind of helped me go, that person on the team, it's not that they're a bad person. They're not a good fit for my business model. I need somebody else there.
And that's a great way of stating that too, is, it may not be it's just may not be the right fit, and
Yep.
that's reality. I mean, people, you're going to find out, like you said, the accountant didn't know the assets that well on multifamily apartments and all the innuendos of that. It's questions you learn to ask.
Yep.
We all, when we start walking, we don't take on a marathon the next day. We crawl, we fall down, we walk, we fall down. And you've gone through that scenario. So is that some of I mean, it sounds like some of the obstacles you've learned through the way. And what else, what are some other things that may have helped you grow to overcome some of these hurdles that you've seen in multiple businesses?
Yeah, so I think the achievement hamster, we talked about that. The team part of it
Yeah.
is that will highlight what maybe you're not good at. So having a little bit of introspection on yourself. And for me, I'm an inertia guy. I'm a founder. I like to get stuff going. I'm not an inventor, but
Yeah.
I can take a broken bicycle wheel, fix it, and get the machine going. So I know that about myself. I can do the CEO stuff. I can go
Yeah.
through boring reports and look at accounting and read. I had to. I mean,
Yeah.
I've taken online courses and in college courses to figure out how to underwrite commercial property, and it's freaking boring.
Right.
So, but you learn all that stuff, and I think the big thing is I think it's on the Temple of Apollo in Greece, but it says know thyself. So as
Yeah.
you start to know yourself, you know what you're not good at, and you can put somebody in place there. But the last thing that I think the most important thing, and I hinted at earlier, is fighter pilots. We talk about plan, execute, debrief,
Right.
right? Um, it's kind of exciting for me, but Single Seat Wisdom Volume 2, those out of those 20 fighter pilots, we were able to secure a test pilot and an astronaut. So he sees
Oh,
the world
cool.
from a different perspective, but his chapter is plan, execute, debrief. And he talks about some of the failures that he saw in his career as an astronaut and fighter pilot and test pilot. But that construct is very important as a business owner, entrepreneur,
Yeah.
father, husband, wife, what have you, to plan enough to get going. So don't get stuck in analysis paralysis. If you are
Right.
one of those people, set a date. Go, hey, on July 1st, I'm going to hit the gas pedal. I'm going to put this plan into action. The next one is as you're executing it, if you know thyself and you have your team, you can be tweaking that
Yeah.
execution plan. And then most importantly, I'd say something that American fighter pilots are very, very good at is debriefing. So we have, even and I'm not plugging the book. Like I'm not saying people need to buy the book, but the Single Seat Wisdom Volume 1, there's a Top Gun instructor pilot. So he went through Top Gun school. He was a Top Gun instructor pilot in the Air Force Weapons School. And his chapter is The Art of a Fighter Pilot Debrief. And he has an
Mm.
actual framework that he wrote, which is you start at the top and you ask yourself, did I execute my game plan? And then it's just a simple question answer and it gets you to your root cause. And that's I think the
Right.
important piece of that is as you're debriefing, one of the trickiest things for me, Bob, is when something happens and it's luck,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
Because then you may not debrief, but you didn't learn, right?
Right.
And you may do the same thing over, unfortunately, and it may fail
Yeah.
because of luck.
Right. There's no clear answer.
Yeah. So
But,
that debriefing portion, if you are, plan enough to get going, and then each day, at the end of the day, or in your 5 minutes, your sacred 5 minutes in the morning, debrief yourself so that you can tweak your plan, you can get out there and execute, and then make sure that you debrief. And if you think that you're real, if you, if you're like me and you think that you're smart enough to remember everything and you don't write things down,
yeah,
you
doesn't work.
lose. You
Yeah.
deserve to crash and burn. So start writing stuff down. Don't think of it as a journal. If you're a dude, maybe like scribing or keeping notes or whatever.
Yeah.
But go back and review that stuff because a lot of your answers will be right in front of your face. So
Yeah.
that's kind of the last thing that has really helped me as a business owner is it's like, man, if I'm feeling the squeeze or if life is heavy, I go, what do I need to debrief myself on? Where is my pain point so that I can even, maybe remove a person, insert somebody into the team. Maybe I'm not filling up my spiritual bucket. I'm not praying enough. I'm not spending enough time with my family. Maybe I'm just achieving stuff, but
Yeah.
where are we going with this? So I think those things, the achievement hamster wheel, the 5 minutes each morning, the team around you, your most influential people that you have around you. And then the last one is plan, execute, and then most importantly, debrief so that you can
Yeah.
tweak your plan and re-execute again the next day.
Wow. Good stuff, Dominic. Well, where can people find out more about you and get a hold of you and your courses? I mean, this sounds really interesting. I got to get, I think I might have to look at a few of those volumes. So where can they find out more about you?
Yep. So singleseatmindset.com. So like single seat is in one seat, singleseatmindset.com. For your listeners, if they're in the US, this is a hidden link, but singleseatmindset.com/podcast gift. It's all one word. It's all lowercase. So podcast gift, singleseatmindset.com/podcast gift. If they go there, the first 3 listeners, I'll send them a free copy. I'll send you a free copy, but I'll send them a free copy of our Single Seat Wisdom Volume 1 book. If you're outside the US, still reach out and contact me. I'll figure out how to get one to you. We're here to give back. Obviously, it does something for me, right? Because like altruistically, I feel really good to help other people. So we're in the business of giving here. And that's our launch pad, singleseatmindset.com.
That's awesome. Well, we'll make sure we do that and remember that offer that he's given us. So I appreciate that so much, Dominic. And thank you for, your experience and thank you for your service and what you're doing. I mean, giving to those kids is a great thing. I appreciate it so much. Thanks for being a guest on the Encouragement Engineering podcast. I really appreciate your time today.
Had a good time. Thanks, Bob.
Great. Thank you.